Hello and welcome everyone to the Missoula Public Library. I am Executive Director Slavin Lee. I'm sorry that there aren't chairs for everyone. Missoula is amazing. This is incredible. Thank you for coming. I wanted to start by introducing myself, of course, and then also letting you know that the Missoula Public Library acknowledges that we sit on the ancestral homeland of the Bitterroot, Salish, and Kalispel peoples. These lands were acquired by dispossession and attempts at deliberate and systematic destruction of indigenous culture. We recognize that acknowledging the colonial past of Montana and upholding indigenous voices helps us all move forward collectively. Missoula Public Library commits to actively working to increase indigenous engagement and access by providing a welcoming space on their homelands, which celebrates and showcases indigenous voices through programming, art displays, our collections, and Salish language signage. So thank you so much. I wanted to introduce Mara from Fact and Fiction. She'll tell you more about our program tonight. And introduce the speakers.
Yeah, wow. Way to go coming out. So Fact and Fiction would like to welcome everyone to this author talk with Stephanie Land and Hank Green for the release of Stephanie's new book, Class, a Memoir of Motherhood, Hunger, and Higher Education. Thank you so much to Slavin, Celia, and the Missoula County Public Library for offering this beautiful space to gather and celebrate the power of shared stories. We would personally like to thank Stephanie and Hank for supporting local independent bookstores, libraries, and literacy within our community and beyond. When Made was released as a popular Netflix series, Stephanie worked alongside Fact and Fiction to donate a portion of our sales of signed paperback copies of her first memoir to Mountain Home, a local community nonprofit that assists single mothers. We sent books all over the world and were able to make a sizable donation to Mountain Home. Tonight, I want to let you know that we will also donate a portion of the profits for sales of Class to Mountain Home and to the UM Food Pantry, which assists students who suffer from food insecurity. Books are available for purchase if you don't already have one at the back of the room. And Stephanie will be staying afterwards to sign books for folks. Unfortunately, Hank's unable to stay, but we'll get some time with him in here. So without further ado, I'll introduce our speakers. Hank Green started making YouTube videos in 2007 with his brother John. He and John co-founded Complexly, which produces SciShow, Crash Course, Study Hall, and nearly a dozen other educational YouTube channels. His love of the online community prompted Hank and John to co-found their endeavors, including VidCon, dftba.com, and the Project for Awesome. Hank is also the best-selling author of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. Most recently, Hank and John are raising money to dramatically and systematically improve maternal health care in Sierra Leone, where, if trends continue, 1 in 17 women will die in childbirth. Stephanie Land is the author of the New York Times bestseller Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive, called A Testimony Worth Listening to by the New York Times and the inspiration for the Netflix series Made. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Atlantic, and many other outlets. Her writing focuses on social and economic justice and parenting under the poverty line. She is a frequent speaker at colleges and national advocacy organizations. Thank you again for being here, and let's welcome Hank and Stephanie.
Hey, everybody. This is amazing. There's like a little peanut gallery over here of people who don't mind the floor. It's very nice to see everyone. Thank you for doing this. Oh, your mic's not on.
Should I? Oh, thank you. Had to turn it on.
You did it.
There, yes.
Awesome.
Thank you for being here with me.
Yeah.
Should we stand?
No.
No?
They
Oh,
gave
okay.
us chairs for a reason. It's going to be like a podcast for a lot of you. You're just going to look at the back of someone's head and listen to our voices. I recently had a meeting in this room with a bunch of people at my company, and it was very boring. This is going to be way better than that. So I assume you're exhausted. Book tour. You have like one more day of book tour.
One more in-person event, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, two. I have one after Thanksgiving, too.
Oh my. So book tours are great and fun the whole time. As
Yes.
the energy we're going to try to put out, and never totally exhausting. But
No, not at all.
So this is your new book. Probably a lot of people have read Made. Where are we sort of like going from where we left off in Made as we move into this new book?
Made ends a few months after we moved to Missoula, the beginning of 2012. And that book ends on kind of a literal high note, where we climbed up to the mountain over there with the M on it, and it's kind of this like woohoo moment. And people have said to me over the years, like, I'm so glad you have your happy ending. And I was thinking, like, it gets so much worse after that, though. And so this is that story. So this book picks up at the beginning of my senior year and my daughter's first day of kindergarten, and kind of follows a parallel of my experience as a low-income, non-traditional college student and her experience as the child of a low-income parent.
So I just got done doing cancer treatment. That's why my hair is this much. People are like, how long has it been? And I'm like, this long. I felt very seen at a moment, or a few moments in this book, where people would say to me, like, you're so strong, you're so like brave, so much grit, because you're doing this really hard thing. And I'm like, I am existing inside of the circumstance I'm existing in, my man. Like, this is all I've got. Like, the alternative is dying, and like not. It's like not a fun way. Like, it's not like a good, easy death. This is better than that. I'm so interested in this sort of resilience narrative, where it's kind of a way of saying there's. So like a person who's in a bad situation, we can sort of either, like, there's these two ways you can do it. You could say that person, well, they deserve it, which I got some of that. They're like, what did you do to get cancer? And I'm like, that's not how it works. And then there's the sort of like, you can ascribe to them virtue. You can say you are doing an amazing thing, and that way you're like giving them that. But this, like, for one, it requires them to sort of like hit all your points of personal virtuosity. Like you have to be what I consider to be virtuous in order to be the person who has virtue who is doing a hard thing. And I wonder if there's I think you're asking us to have a better idea, like have a better story to tell about people who are in hard situations. And I wonder if there is a version of that story that we can get into our heads more easily.
Well, I think the thing that really started to bug me was when I would talk to people about how I was worried about my child and what she was going through, and they would tell me, oh, but children are resilient. And over the years that started to really bother me, because it was like, well, I don't think so. I think they just can't express themselves in words. like they don't have the language skills to talk about how stressed out they are, what they're going through. They don't know how to really talk about it in an emotional way, other than, things that we tell them not to do in grocery stores. And so that really bothered me. But then I started to see it as I needed to be small and appreciative. I felt like I was expected to be kind of like an Oliver Twist type of character when I was asking for resources or any sort of help. I was not allowed to be angry. There's a line in the book that says I didn't have the privilege to feel, and I really felt that a lot of the time, that what they call resilience is really just forced acceptance, and it's a way of telling someone, oh, we're not going to fix the systemic structures that are around you that are forcing you to be resilient. We're just going to say, you got this, and you're resilient, and you're a super mom, and all of this stuff, so that we don't really have to do anything.
Right. Yeah, and also I can still kind of feel comfortable in the situation I'm in, whereas, and like people don't want to be asked to be less comfortable, you know? It's like, get comfortable with being less comfortable. That's been the story for, you know, hopefully longer than the last 5 years, but certainly the last 5 years or so. And people rebel hard against that. And I can kind of see, did you try to veer away from that a little bit in Made, or were you leaning into that there too?
Well, with Made, it was very much something that happened to me. You know,
Yeah.
like I had this essay that went viral, and then suddenly I had a book deal. Was still very much a single mom in low-income housing, and I felt very apologetic in writing that book. You know, like in how I presented it. I still kind of had this sense that I was taking up space in society and in the publishing world, I guess, with my story. And it just, but by the time I started writing this book, I had a new sense of normalcy. You know, this story happened 10 years ago. And so it was just, it felt different writing it. And I got very angry writing it, and just because I saw the person that I was at that time, and just all the things that I had to go through, and it was purely because, of the subject matter of the book, of how hard it is to access higher education as a poor person.
There's something that I've gotten, I have, because of my work, had the opportunity to get invited into like trying to understand a lot of the problems with higher ed and why the barriers are so high for a lot of people, how it fails a lot of the time. But I haven't, those people aren't storytellers. They're like people who work inside of the system. So to have a professional storyteller tell that story is, I think, like, it is a very important part of us understanding the successes and the failures of that system. And I just think that we are so far away from understanding how big the problem is, and how deep the class divide is. And I really was like that. I was like completely oblivious to it until I started to try and make content to try and help people get access to education, and to understand like what the barriers actually were. So I don't know. Like, I'll also say, this is just me. Usually at an event like this is a true story. In order to get in, you have to buy a copy of the book. And the reason is because the New York Times has a list. And if everybody who comes to the event buys a copy of the book, then all of you, to get on the list, I don't know, it's like 10,000 copies. So if you can do 10,000 person rooms, then you can get on the list. And Stephanie is not making you do that, because this book is about having access to things. And so to say you can't have access to this book, and you and your family, there's 5 of you, and so you're going to have 5 copies of this damn book. So if you're interested in this stuff, it made me think so many things. It changed my perspective on so much stuff. And you have amazing adventures that are so dumb. And
I have scars to prove
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure you do. It's joyful, and it is a condemnation, and it is a celebration. It's all the things. So I want to shout out. Stephanie's gonna hang out and sign books. You should buy a book because she didn't make you buy one. That's why you should buy one.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So to talk a little bit about, I guess, higher ed. First, can you tell me what the stupidest part was? Like, what's the thing that you're like, that is so broken? I cannot believe it is like that. Is this Shakespeare?
That was definitely one of them. Yeah, I actually took Shakespeare twice, I think, because there was beginning Shakespeare and then the real Shakespeare class.
Shakespeare. It's a sequel, advanced Shakespeare.
But the things that I started out with was through online community college classes, and the online system was great. But I had to take interpersonal communications online.
Yeah, they were really thinking when they did that. They were like, let's not change that. Let's just have a fake version.
I had to take PE online.
Did you just do crunches in the apartment?
No, I lied. I mean, I didn't at first. I was telling her, because I was working as a house cleaner, which does its exercise, but I was also living we had to put the food that we ate. And so I was like, it was all peanut butter. And at one point she said, yes, peanut butter is a good source of protein, but you do need some variations. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to lie from now on. And I think, a lot of the core classes, I have absolutely no interest in math. I have never used math, in the way that I was required to in school, but I had to pay hundreds of dollars to learn about it.
But it's math, isn't it?
I know you like math.
Isn't it fun?
I'm married to a physicist too. I'm not allowed to complain about the math in my house either.
So what do you think? Oh, so I gave you Shakespeare, and you gave me phys ed.
Well, the Shakespeare class.
Online phys ed. Is there any sort of I don't know, functional part? What's a thing we could make better that would make this thing way more accessible? What's the thing that would do, a system that would do a lot?
One thing.
I don't know.
Besides it not costing that much money.
Well, we were talking about backstage having something to do with your child while you were at school.
Yeah.
Shakespeare in particular is hard because it was 3 days a week for 1 hour in the middle of the day.
Right. And so I could not work before or after that class. Yeah. And up until that point, I had stacked all of my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that I could work during the day on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and would only need a babysitter on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Childcare would have been huge. But also, I don't think classes really need to be that long of a period of time. I really appreciated the conversations surrounding an intensive class that meets on Saturdays, that's only 6 weeks instead of, 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And I also, the online option is really fantastic. In the pandemic, there was a lot more online schooling options, and then it just all went away. And I was really bummed to see that happen, because in a hybrid situation, or you only have to come to class every once in a while to take a test, then the childcare situation would kind of take care of itself maybe. There's a lot of things that you can do if you start to imagine that your student body is, 1 in 10 of them are probably parents. There's a good majority of them who possibly need to work full time. There's, 23% of them are hungry. 10% of them are homeless. If you start to not think of your whole entire students like as 22-year-olds who just walked from the dorm and have no other responsibilities except to be in your classroom. Then you can get creative, and it will help it make more accessible.
Yeah, we are wrong about the student. Like when we think of you think of a college student, you have a very particular idea. I think more than half of students now are what we would call non-traditional. So they are people who are going back to school. They often have families. They often have dependents. They might be taking care of a parent. And this is so stupid, but you know how much school costs? Like you hear oh my gosh, you graduated with $100,000 in student loans. That's which is not typical. But you did graduate with $100,000 in lost income. Everyone does. If you make $30,000 a year, and there's 4 years of not being able to work full time, that's the biggest cost. And I shouldn't say no one knows this. I did not realize that. That did not fit into my brain of what college was about. But if you don't have the money to have an apartment, have food, that's what you have student loans. You think that's supposed to go to the school, but it also has to go to eating food, and taking care of whatever pieces of your family are dependent on you. So we are just kind of wrong about it, but also those are the students who are most likely to be failed by the system, who are the ones who need it the most, need the education the most, they need the support the most, and they are least likely to graduate at all, and most likely to have student loans. And so you end up not graduating, and having student loans, which is the worst of both worlds. And it just seems like that's the group we are least interested in helping, because they're the ones that are hardest to get money out of.
Yes, and they require the things that I was just talking about.
Right.
They require you to think. Yeah. They require you to
change stuff and maybe make it a little harder for the traditional students.
Yeah.
Or different.
I think the thing about college is really the merch involved and the experience and the thing that they're trying to sell, so that students will travel from some other place and spend out of state tuition and be part of this thing and I feel like there's a lot of that involved there, just in selling the college experience.
Yeah, it's a lot about sales. If any of you work in higher ed, you know that, and it's real tricky. So you said there was a few lines in this that knocked me over, made me just stop and have a little cry. This was one when you said, an education hadn't crossed my mind as a thing I wasn't supposed to have, which hit me hard for two reasons at the same time. One is that you were kind of being told at that moment by people and by society that education maybe wasn't something you were supposed to have. And two, that a lot of people do have heard that. And you hadn't had that message get to you yet. And I'm curious why, do you think there's a reason why you hadn't had that? Because I know a lot of people who always knew that education wasn't for them, and either got it through very hard work and luck and weird circumstances, or never got it. Do you have any idea why? How did you have that in your head in the first place? That was a thing that you deserved.
I don't know if I guess
deserve is a terrible word, but
yeah. I'm trying to think of what the context is for that line, because there were times that I did feel like that would be the natural progression of my education, because all of my peers in the classroom were all talking about where did you go, or with your parents, where did you get in? Did you fill out the application? And so I kind of felt like that was going to be me too. And then when I talked to my parents about it, they said, well, no, there's no money for that. And so I gave up immediately. But then when I did start going to school, it was right after the recession. I couldn't get a job that was within daycare hours, and all of those jobs required some kind of degree. at the time, and so I went to school through the community college route, and there was an overwhelming response to me of that I should get educated just enough so that I could be a secretary, or I could get like an admin assist, and just get educated just enough so that I could be a contributing member of society and not have to be on food stamps anymore. Beyond that was never something that I felt was I deserved, or because that was frivolous, that was being selfish, that was following my dreams without that much security at the end of a job. And so any education that I was counseled to have meant, well, because this will put you in a job.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So you've had a weird few years. I think it's probably, well, I want to ask this question at some point. So you say you wrote this essay. It got turned into a book, got turned into a very successful book. It got turned into a Netflix series. But you also used that essay to apply to the MFA program at the University of Montana, and they were like, eh.
That is true. Yeah, that is what I was rejected for.
Would you think they were pretty wrong?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'll say that. I have been reassured that I don't need an MFA degree, but I am still technically not allowed to mentor MFA students.
Because you don't have an MFA?
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. That seems fine and normal. I don't know, man. I feel like there's better ways to do this. I know that systems are systems and they're hard, and also that's just one data point, but that's weird. So you have an audience now. Do you feel like you have an audience?
I do right now.
Well, I forgot about them. Yeah. But do you feel like you have I don't know, you got like people. You got like people who are like, you got fans.
I do have fans, yeah. I've been traveling around the country for the last 2 weeks. And I travel anyways. I work as a public speaker. But yeah, my last event, someone flew there from LA to St. Louis to meet me. So,
yeah. I mean, I do that shit.
That's totally normal. Totally normal.
If it's a nonstop, I'll get on a plane to see a band, that's never going to come to Missoula.
That's true.
Yeah.
I have traveled for music.
For that one lady from LA.
Oh, that's putting too much pressure on me. I feel like I'm going to have to sing.
Really entertain people.
Or perform.
We're going to do a dance later. We learned a whole TikTok thing. It's all arms, so it's fine. Yeah. So how do you imagine? Do you have them in your head? Do you have feel like an obligation to them?
I do at times. There's different groups. I don't know. The whole social media thing is still kind of something that's in the clouds for me, and it's not really real. But every different platform will have a different type of person.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, and so I think there's the Instagram crowd, and then there's Facebook that is mostly people that I kind of sort of know, and then TikTok, I don't even know what's going on there, and then but then I'll meet. Oh, TikTok we're live on TikTok right now, and so, but then I'll meet people, and there's two different kinds. There's I get a lot of motherly types who want to be a surrogate aunt.
They want to help you
by giving me really strange advice.
Sure.
Or advice that I think is strange to give a 45-year-old woman with 2 kids and a house and a mortgage, and it's just weird. I don't need to know that you need to use less shampoo when you cut your hair short. It happened. And then I have a lot of people who felt less alone by reading my story, and those are the people that I want to talk to. I just can't a lot of the times. My doctor introduced me to a thing called secondary trauma, and it's usually saved for paramedics and people who are like in very traumatic moments while someone is experiencing it. But after the series came out, I started to hear a lot about things that people had been through, and it's very violent, and I can't absorb that anymore, and so it's very hard for me, especially when people approach me out in public when I'm like trying to buy tampons or something, and they suddenly need to, and the ones that are really hard is when they say like, I know you hate this, but, and it's just like, well, now it's just even less consensual.
I know you don't like this, but I'm going, instead of like, I'm going to do this, be like, I know you hate it when people touch your shoulder, but here I come.
Yeah. So I understand that people need to feel seen, and so I do feel somewhat of an obligation in those moments, and I am a very shy, introverted person in real life. And then with this book, like I am very brutally honest about my life and my decisions, and it's lately on this book tour I've been hearing a lot of like, well, you're just so honest and asking me questions. And one lady, actually, the lady who flew from LA said, I know that's a private question, but it's kind of your job to answer these questions. And I was just like, no, it's not, actually. I'm not getting paid right now. It's just not.
That's not what when I write things, that's my just choosing to show you what I want to show. When you ask things, that's extractive. But yeah, I mean, it's so weird. Like, it's very, like, the entire, like, having of a sort of one relationships, people know who you are, you don't know who they are. And it's got to be, I mean, I don't know how weird having a Netflix series would be, but that sounds extra weird, especially because they're like fictional versions of you. Yeah,
people were kind of mad that there was no Regina, or that my mom and I don't talk. Like I felt like I kept letting people down because they fell in love with this series and these characters, and then I am obviously not that person. You know, I have a different name, but then it's just like, how's your mom doing? And it's like, I don't know. I haven't talked to her for 10 years. Like, oh, and it's just, and I was just like, all right,
oh, that's so weird.
I've just disappointed you now.
You're like another person. I was just listening to an interview with, oh shoot, I've started this and I'm gonna mess it up. I can't remember. Never mind. If I mess the names up, it'll be terrible, so I'm not gonna do that. So I don't want to put words in your mouth here. I assume, though, that you feel a fair amount, so like obviously lots of hard work, lots of skill, but also a fair amount of luck. That's how I feel anyway. But I'm curious, sort of like, what's the sort of luckiest thing you felt like happened in your professional life on this path?
Well, I mean, you know very well that there's a lot of luck involved in going viral. Yeah. And so the first viral essay, you know, the one that you mentioned before that I had submitted to someplace else, that went viral and turned into a book deal. That was definitely luck. But I really think where I got lucky was I got into low-income housing because my rent was low enough that my child support covered it, and I could focus on writing. So, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to publish that essay unless I had space and time to think creatively, which is a very expensive thing to do. And so it sucks, but the housing, I mean, secure housing was, I feel, the place where I lucked out the most and helped me the most.
that's not the answer that I expected, and I'm just working through my own feelings about Earth right now.
I'm sorry, I do that sometimes.
We were backstage, and I was like, I hate society. Well, when we were talking about Reddit at that point. So that's, I mean, I guess that I'd like to ask about Missoula then. So Missoula is a character in the book. I love Missoula. You love Missoula. There's a reason why people move here. But it's not an uncomplicated character. You have a scene that's very lovely, very sort of Stars Hollow, idyllic. Like they're on the Christmas tree. I was probably there too when you were there.
Which is crazy. I didn't know you lived here that long.
I've been here.
I thought you were like a newcomer or
No,
something.
2003.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
I'm impressed.
Oh, I guess that's all you have to do. Move here before the pandemic. I was on an airplane, and I was sitting next to a guy, chatted him up, and he was from the Bitterroot, and I looked at him and I was like, no, you're not. And so I asked him how long you lived in the Bitterroot, and he said, well, I moved during the pandemic, and my wife was sitting 3 seats up, because we got split. And I called up to Catherine and I was like, hey, Catherine, this guy moved to the Bitterroot from San Francisco during the pandemic. And everybody on the plane was like, oh! It was great. It was...
Can you fly with me from now on? I need that to happen to me in real life.
Anyway, yeah, so very, and you sort of like talk about how like this is the way that it's supposed to be, and that's how it was before things started to, but like of course it was never perfect. There's always big problems in town. There's always issues, but like I'm curious. Like I want this to be that town, you know. I want it to be a place where all kinds of people feel like they have a place, and I feel like it's getting less that way. I don't feel that way. It's getting less that way. But I'm curious, sort of like, what do you think sort of makes a great town?
Well, from my perspective, you know, I have always been service industry. I have always been, have found myself in tourist-centric towns, and we just kind of ran around as this underbelly. You know, we were the workers. We were the ones who cleaned up after everyone. We were the ones who served everyone. We were what made the town. We did the work to make the town a tourist town. And I think, you know, when the town itself stops supporting those workers, then everything starts to fall apart. And you start seeing these signs that have to close early. Nobody wants to work anymore. And it's like, no, nobody wants to work for you anymore. And so because you're not paying them enough and you're not keeping up with the housing prices. And I think over the years, the saddest thing that has happened is we have lost a lot of really good people in this town because they just cannot afford to work and live here at the same time. And it was that way when I moved here. You know, and it was like what people told me, the wages are low, but then you get to live in Missoula. But now it's just like, that might still be true, but now you can't even enjoy the part of Missoula that like you were able to before. There's lots of reasons for that, but like I think where things really start to fall apart is when you lose the core group of the town, and that's who makes all the other work possible. And if you lose the people who are cleaning up after everyone, then you start to lose everything else.
Yeah, it's hard. Like the thing that I remember, this is the craziest story I heard during the housing craziness that happened. I had a friend who listed their house for sale, and nobody looked at it, and they didn't sell it. And then the realtor was like, let me try something crazy. And they listed it for $200,000 more, and they sold it. Because that wasn't hitting the threshold of the people who were looking to move to town. They were like, well, I want a house that costs at least $500,000, $600,000. And like, if you can't, like I feel like it comes down to inequality, where it's just like if like the amenities. So yeah, I guess this is actually a question I want to ask you, because like I have never been poor, and so like I, you know, don't. And I'm not a sociologist, so I'm like pretending at knowledge here. But I was listening to an interview with you, and the person said, you know, you like in order to like be a person, you need some luxuries in your life. And I was like, I don't know that that's exactly it. I think that in order to be a person, you need to participate in society. You need to feel like you are a part of the community, and you need to feel like you're valued by that community. And like there are costs of admission to those things. You know, like if the cost of the climbing gym is X and you can't afford that, then you're out of that community now. If the cost of the concert is, you know, however much more, then you're out of that community if you can no longer be part of it. And that makes you feel like you're not valued by your community, or you're not a part of your community. So it's not about like splurging for a luxury, which it is also, like it's also a nice, lovely thing to do, but it's also about feeling, like I just want you to tell me if like I feel like you feel like I'm at all on the right track here.
No, that is a lot of it, and but it's also it causes you to really isolate yourself. Just because you don't really want your friends to know that you can't afford to do those things. You know, social media got to be a really hard place to be every once in a while, just because it seemed like everybody went to this thing and I couldn't, because I couldn't afford a babysitter and I couldn't afford to attend. And so the luxuries that people always get mad at me about are even more ridiculous. I mean, people are in this book. They're mad at me that I fed my daughter so much ice cream, because if I can't afford food, then why am I buying my daughter ice cream? And
I'm like, Sweet Peaks, Big Dipper's right there.
it was a block away from our house.
I'm a different outraged. It's a different.
It was when it was like at the old place over by Jimmy John's, and so it was like a block away from our house.
Yeah.
So access.
Okay. The other Sweet. Okay, now it makes more sense. No, I like them both. If the owners of Sweet Peaks are in the room, I was just joking. You're great. Anybody in the room ever worked at Sweet Peaks? Big Dipper? Oh, okay. I don't know. I feel like the room this size, there's just good chances, but I guess I was wrong. I'm interested in this sort of in the narratives that stick for us. So like the narratives of, like, we're all trying to tell stories in which we're not the villain, or even maybe we're the hero. But we also live in an unjust world that has, and maybe we're not. You know, I think Made was probably like a very sticky narrative for people, because it's like, this is where the two collide. It's like the lower class and upper class are like existing inside of each other. That's how I first heard your book kind of pitched to me, was like, look and see how like weird it is to be inside of someone's house.
Oh yeah. That was the thing that they were selling it with. Was, what's it like to be in other people's houses? Which
I do love. I love. My wife used to pet sit, and so we just like sneak in. Like, I don't know what this person's life is like. And then I
nobody hire Hank Green.
No, seriously, I broke a guy's guitar string. I was like secretly, I just had to fess up and be like, Mr. Loberg, I played your guitar. I didn't want to replace it because then it would be weird. But here's $5. So don't hire me to take care of your cat. I'm going back to an older question here, but how, like, what are, because like I think that we find some narratives that work for people. Like, again, this is your fault is a narrative that works for people. This person who says you're welcome when you use food stamps, that's the narrative they're sticking with. And then there's the narrative where there's like, let's ascribe these people virtue, because at least then we're giving them something like in they're better than me in some way. Like, I could never do that, but that's like a, you know, it's a great, like a comic I saw once that was like, man, I don't know how you live that way with that disability. I would rather die. And it's like, that's not a compliment. That's a horrible thing you've said. And so like, but we get to ascribe the virtue, and I'm trying to find the narrative of class that doesn't just like sort of work for me, but also could work for other people. Like, what's the story I can tell them that gets people on board with the fact that this isn't about fault, it's not about what they deserve, and it's not about, like, there is no deserving. Like, we all got born at a time with vaccines and hot water heaters, so like, good on us for that. Nobody deserves those things. Like, most humans didn't get those things. It is about systems that are failing people. And I just don't know how to get people a story that they will, except to like read a whole fucking book, which they should do, to give people a story that will stick in their heads or that they will want to hear because it's going to make them uncomfortable.
I think there's a lot of value in discomfort.
Yeah.
I mean, I have known for a very long time that I was a very palatable poor person story. You know, I'm a privileged person, you know, just in that the later half of my life, you know, we grew up in the suburbs, in what used to be middle class, I guess, and I'm a white person, you know, and by the time my first book came out, I did have a bachelor's degree. I was a success story. I was the rags to riches story. Everybody loves that story. And they grasp onto that story, I think, not just as a way to put more pressure on people, as in like, well, she did it, why can't you? Like, well, look at all of these things that you can achieve if you just pull yourself up by those bootstraps, because it kind of falls into that whole thing. But then it's also, if they focus on stories like that, then they can ignore all the other ones, you know, the people of color who have it much worse and who are actively suffering on the street. And so I think it is just a way to, I don't know, make people feel like everything is actually okay. Because it's hard to remember that people are suffering all the time.
Yep. But important. It's so, I mean, as you read this book, which you're of course going to do, one of the things that made me the most uncomfortable was imagining how I would read the story differently if you weren't white. If you were a Native single mother or a Black single mother, like, it would read different to me, and that is something that that I just think is important to like look at in my own head, and to see that in order to tell these stories, we have to find ways to make them more palatable, and like that's a reality. That's like a true part of this. You talk about how race is kind of a cloak for you, where people wouldn't look at you and think that you were on food stamps just because of how you looked in the book. Yeah,
I still have a lot of conversations with people who assume that I was never in poverty or have been poor, and a lot of people will talk to me about. Because they'll ask me what I'm doing, you know, it's usually in traveling, but the driver of the car or something, so what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm at work. Oh, what do you do? I'd write a book trying to avoid the conversation. And like, oh, what do you write about? I'm like, poverty or homelessness or, you know, something like that. And they will go into this huge thing about this one person that they know who uses all their food stamps to change out for cash and to buy beer. And it's just like, this is interesting to me that I just told you that this is like kind of my genre, and you're still using this as an example of your experience with that. But throughout the years, a lot of conversations happened around me, even when I was still on food stamps. And it was always those people and kind of this like imagined person and there's so much racism involved in that. But there's also a narrative that has been promoted by politicians for years, and I think a lot of it just goes into not just keeping the workers poor, who, because you need people to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do. And how you do that is by keeping them desperate and hungry and uneducated and sick, so that they have to go to work. It's not a choice. And to just establish this caste system that we have in this country. And so I think a lot of it is purposeful, and a lot of it is full of mistrust. I mean, it's just not trusting people, poor people, especially with money. Yeah. And I've never understood that part of it either. Like, I would never loan my friend $20 and say, okay, I'm going to need an itemized list of exactly how you spent that money and why. And because I had to do that every month that I lived in transitional housing. I had to hand in a piece of paper about what money came in and why it went out. And like I said earlier, with like having some distance from that and having different experiences in the doctor's office and at the grocery store and just in society in general, like to go back and think about the fact that I handed in these papers that told people whether or not I had a burial plot, like in order to eat food. And it's so degrading and it's so invasive. But at the time, it was how I fed myself and my child. And I think that's something that I'm going to struggle with for the rest of my life. I mean, just that I was basically told, no, you can't eat because you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, or because you've decided that you want to get an education, but now your kid is 6, and so now you need to be full-time working, and so you can't do that.
Yeah, the work requirements are, the first and foremost thing that needs to go always, but that is always the thing that people start talking about first.
Yeah, I often think about how one of the, everybody is like, well, like a lot of people in this room have never been on government assistance, but yeah, you have. Because one of the biggest pieces of government assistance is the mortgage tax cut. So if you have a mortgage, that's $70 billion a year that the government spends on making it so you don't have to pay taxes on the money that you spend on your mortgage, which is good for you and realtors and making houses more expensive. And we're not going to get rid of it, but that's a big bill, and it helps a lot of people who don't need help, including me. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'll do it. I guess I'll submit that paperwork. What a weird thing.
The food stamps, though, that is very visible. I mean, it is a very personal transaction, but it is the most visible form of government assistance. Yeah. And it gets personal because there is a very strong cutoff point between who qualifies and who doesn't. And I once didn't qualify for childcare because I made $100 too much a month. And then, when you cross that line, I'm sure as a lot of people know in this room, you suddenly lose hundreds of dollars in support and grants. And so what does that do? That just keeps you in your job, and not trying to improve yourself. So there's a lot of animosity between those two groups of the people who do qualify and the people who are just over the line and don't. And so when you see a person with a couple of kids and they're buying a bunch of cupcakes and candy and putting it on the EBT card, that upsets people for some reason. But I mean, I just learned about the mortgage thing. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that I don't know about.
Yeah. So what are some of the, we're wrapping up here. You're gonna do a signing afterward.
Yes, I'm gonna do a signing back there.
Back there. I'm gonna run away, put my child to bed. I feel like your work has now reached a lot of people. I mean, I don't feel that way. That is the case. What are some of the best parts of that for you?
wow, no one's ever asked me that, like, in that way before. Most of them say, like, wow, you're successful now. What's it like? I'm like, I don't know. The best parts, I think, you know, are, as exhausting as advocacy work is, it is, I really live for the moments when people will tell me, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that you can't buy toilet paper with food stamps. Or, you know, I didn't know. And so my hope is that they will take that newfound knowledge and, you know, internalize some empathy and compassion, but also vote differently.
Yeah. One of the things that hit me really hard was like 3 tardies for Cora was like detention.
For my kindergarten, yeah.
In kindergarten. And I'm like, that's not the child's fault. And also, like, this is a thing that happens. Like, people's lives aren't smooth and perfect. And, like, is there no allowance for that? And, like, I just, like, reading that, hopefully people can read stories like these or hear stories like these in whatever way.
Yeah, I really live for the comments. Twitter can be a nice place every once in a while. Recently,
Are you sure?
Yeah, sometimes. If you block enough people, it's really nice. A professor once told me that she's now going to put on the syllabus, explain what office hours are, and put children are always welcome. And I didn't do it. She did. And I love it when people tell me that they tipped the hotel, you know, house cleaner. I especially love it when they send me pictures of the fact that they bunched up all the sheets and towels and stuff for, just like, I love knowing that there are people who are remembering, and remembering, you know, that tip culture is not this horrible thing. It is how people have enough money to buy their kid a Happy Meal. And so those are, and I do hear from a lot of elementary school teachers who tell me I look at the kid in my classroom differently now, because I think, you know, that was the hardest thing for me, was I'm not uncaring. Like, I don't, like, not want to be there. It's just I can't. I'm working. And so I don't know, just like these little speckles of, you know, compassion that happen are, to me, they're not necessarily what gets me up in the morning. Coffee does that, but lots of coffee these days. But, you know, it does keep me going, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we don't change our minds without good stories. We don't change our world without good stories. So thank you so much for writing good stories.
Thank you. Thank you for being with me tonight up here in front of all these nice people and agreeing to go live on TikTok. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
This
everyone.
is amazing. This is amazing.